Section 20. Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christina, Lauralino. Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland. Translated by Grace Jane Wallace. St. Gall the 4th through December 19th. St. Gall the 4th. Motto: Vous pensez que je suis l'abbé du Zangal. Citoyen: I do feel so comfortable here, after braving such storms and tempests. During the 4 hours when I was crossing the mountains from Altstetten to this place, I was engaged in a regular battle with the elements. When I tell you that I never experienced anything like the storm, nor even imagined anything approaching to it, this does not say much. But the oldest people in the canton declare the same. A large manufactory has been demolished, and several persons killed. Tomorrow, in my last letter from Switzerland, I will tell you of my being again obliged to travel on foot, and arriving here after crossing by Appenzell, which looked like Egypt after the 7 plagues. The bell is now ringing for dinner, and I mean to feast like an abbot. Lindau, September 5th. Opposite me lies Switzerland, with her dark blue mountains, pedestrian journeys, storms, and glorious heights and valleys. Here ends the greatest part of my journey, and my journal also. At noon today, I crossed the wild gray Rhine in a ferry boat above Rheineck, and now here I am, already in Bavaria. I have, of course, entirely given up my projected excursion on foot through the Bavarian mountains, for it would be folly to attempt anything of the kind this year. For the last 4 days it has rained more or less with incessant vehemence. It seemed as if Providence were wroth. I passed today through extensive orchards, which were not under water, but fairly submerged by mud and clay. Everything looks deplorable and depressing. You must therefore forgive the doleful style of this last sheet. I never in any landscape saw a more dreary sight than the sward of the green hills, covered with deep snow, while below the fruit trees, with their ripe fruit, were standing reflected in the water. The scanty covering of muddy snow, which lay on the fir woods and meadows, looked the personification of all that was dismal. A Sargensberger told me that in 1811 this little town had been entirely burnt down, and recently with difficulty rebuilt, that they depend chiefly on the produce of their vineyards, which have been this year destroyed by hailstorms, and the Alps also were now no longer available. This gives rise to serious reflections, and to anxious thoughts with regard to this year. It is singular enough that if I am obliged to go on foot in such weather and fairly exposed to it, I am not in the least annoyed. On the contrary, I rather rejoice in setting it at defiance. When I arrived by the diligence yesterday at Altstetten, in freezing cold, like a day in December, I found that there was no carriage road to Turgen, to which place I had unluckily sent on my cloak and knapsack on the last fine day. I was obliged to have them the same evening, for the cold was intense, so I did not hesitate long, but set off once more for the last time to cross the mountains, and arrived in the canton of Appenzell. The state of the woods and hills and meadows and little bridges baffles all description. Being Sunday and divine service going on, I failed in procuring a guide. Not a living soul met me the whole way, for all the people had crept into their houses. So I toiled on quite alone towards Turgen. To pass through a wood in such weather and along such paths inspires a wonderful sense of independence. Moreover, I am now quite perfect in the Swiss yodeling and crowing, so I shouted lustily, and yodeled several airs at the pitch of my voice, and arrived in Turgen in capital spirits. The people in the inn there were rude and saucy, so I politely said, "You be hanged, I shall go on," and taking out my map, I found that St. Gall was the nearest convenient place, and in fact the only practicable route. I could not succeed in persuading anyone to go with me in such horrible weather, so I resolved to carry my own things, abusing all Swiss cordiality. Shortly afterwards, however, came the reverse of the medal, which not unfrequently occurs. I went to the peasant who had brought my luggage here, and found him in his pretty newly built wooden house, and I had thus an opportunity of seeing a veritable and genuine Swiss interior, just as we imagine it to be. He and his whole family were sitting round a table, the house clean and warm, and the stove burning. The old man rose and gave me his hand, and insisted on my taking a seat. He then sent through the whole place to try to get me a carriage, or a man to carry my things. But as no one would either drive or walk, he at last sent his own son with me. He only asked 2 batzen for carrying my knapsack for 2 hours. A very pretty fair daughter was sitting at the table sewing, the mother reading a thick book, and the old man himself studying the newspapers. It was a charming picture. When at last I set off, the weather seemed to say, "If you defy me, I can defy you also." For the storm broke loose with redoubled violence, and an invisible hand appeared to seize my umbrella at intervals, shaking it and crumpling it together, and my fingers were so benumbed that I could scarcely hold it fast. The paths were so desperately slippery that my guide fell sprawling full length before me in the mud. But what cared we? We yodeled and reviled the weather to our heart's content, and at last we passed the nunnery, which we greeted by a serenade, and soon after reached St. Gall. Our journey was happily over, and yesterday I drove here, and at night met with a wonderful organ on which I could play Schmuck dich o lieb Ziel to my heart's content. Today I proceed to Memmingen, tomorrow to Augsburg, the day after, God willing, to Munich. And thus I may now say I have been in Switzerland. Perhaps I have rather bored you by all the trivial occurrences I have detailed. These are gloomy times, but we need not be so. And when I sent you my journal, it was chiefly to show you that I thought of you whenever I was pleased and happy, and was with you in spirit. The shabby, dripping pedestrian bids you farewell, and a town gentleman, with visiting cards, fine linen, and a black coat, will write you next time. Farewell, Felix. Berger, letter from Munich. Munich, October 6, 1831. It is a delightful feeling to wake in the morning and to know that you are to score a grand allegro with all sorts of instruments and various oboes and trumpets, while bright weather holds out the hope of a cheering long walk in the afternoon. I have enjoyed these pleasures for a whole week past, so the favorable impression that Munich made on me during my first visit is now very much enhanced. I scarcely know any place where I feel so comfortable and domesticated as here. It is indeed very delightful to be surrounded by cheerful faces, and your own to be so also, and to know every man you meet in the streets. I am now preparing for my concert, so my hands are pretty full. My acquaintances every instant interrupting me in my work, the lovely weather tempting me to go out, and the copyists, in turn, forcing me to stay at home. All this constitutes the most agreeable and exciting life. I was obliged to put off my concert on account of the October Festival, which begins next Sunday and lasts all the week. Every evening there is to be a performance at the theater and a ball, so all idea of an orchestra or a concert room is out of the question. On Monday evening, however, the 17th, at 6:30, think of me, for then we dash off with 30 violins and 2 sets of wind instruments. The first part begins with the symphony in C minor, the second with the Midsummer Night's Dream. The first part closes with my new concerto in G minor, and at the end of the second, I have unwillingly agreed to extemporize. Believe me, I do so very reluctantly, but the people insist upon it. Baumann has decided on playing again. Breting, Mademoiselle Vial, Loel, Bayer, and Pellegrini are the singers who are to execute a piece together. The locality is the large Odeon Hall, and the performance for the benefit of the poor in Munich. The magistrates invite the orchestra, and the burgomasters the singers. Every morning I am engaged in writing, correcting, and scoring till 1 o'clock, when I go to Scheidel's coffee house in the Kaufinga Gasse, where I know each face by heart and find the same people every day in the same position. 2 playing chess, 3 looking on, 5 reading the newspapers, 6 eating their dinner, and I am the 7th. After dinner, Baumann usually comes to fetch me, and we make arrangements about the concert. Or, after a walk, we have cheese and beer, and then I return home and set to work again. This time I have declined all invitations for the evening, but there are so many agreeable houses to which I can go uninvited that a light is seldom to be seen in my room on the parterre till after 8 o'clock. You must know that I lodge on a level with the street, in a room which was once a shop, so that if I unbar the shutters of my glass door, one step brings me into the middle of the street, and anyone passing along can put his head in at the window and say good morning. Next to me a Greek lodges, who is learning the piano, and he is truly odious. But to make up for that, my landlord's daughter, who wears a round silver cap and is very slender, looks all the prettier. I have music in my rooms at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 times every week. Barman, Breting, Stouditje, young Poisel, and others come regularly, and we have a musical picnic. In this way I become acquainted with operas, which, most unpardonably, I have not yet either heard or seen, such as Lodoiska, Faniska, Medea, also the Preciosa, Abu Hassan, etc. The theater lends us the scores. Last Wednesday we had capital fun. Several wagers had been lost, and it was agreed that we should enjoy the fruits of them all together. And after various suggestions, we at last decided on having a musical soiree in my room, and to invite all the dignitaries. So a list was made out of about 30 persons. Several also came uninvited, who were presented to us by mutual friends. There was a sad want of space. At first we proposed placing several people on my bed, but it was surprising the number of patient sheep who managed to cram into my small room. The whole affair was most lively and successful. E. was present, as dulcet as ever, languishing in all the glory of poetical enthusiasm, and grey stockings, in short, tiresome beyond all description. First I played my old quartet in B minor, then Breting sang Adelaide. Herr S. played variations on the violin. Doing himself no credit, Barman performed Beethoven's first quartet in F major, which he had arranged for 2 clarionets, corno de bassetto, and bassoon. An air from Wee Wee Anthe followed, which was furiously encored, and as a finale I extemporized. Tried hard to get off, but they made such a tremendous uproar that nolens I was forced to comply, though I had nothing in my head but wine glasses, benches, cold roast meat, and ham. The Cornelius ladies were next door with my landlord and his family to listen to me. The Schauroths were making a visit on the first story for the same purpose, and even in the hall and in the street people were standing. In addition to all this, the heat of the crowded room, the deafening noise, the gay audience, and when at last the time for eating and drinking arrived, the uproar was at its height. We fraternized, glass in hand, and gave toasts. The more formal guests with their grave faces sat in the midst of the jovial throng, apparently quite contented, and we did not separate till 1:30 in the morning. The following evening formed a striking contrast. I was summoned to play before the Queen and the court. There all was proper and polite and polished, and every time you moved your elbow you pushed against an excellency. The most smooth and complimentary phrases circulated in the room, and I, the roturier, stood in the midst of them, with my citizen heart and my aching head. I managed, however, to get on pretty well, and at the end I was commanded to extemporize on royal themes, which I did and was mightily commended. What pleased me most was that when I finished my extempore playing, the Queen said to me that it was strange the power I possessed of carrying away my audience, for that during such music no one could think of anything else, on which I begged to apologize for carrying away Her Majesty, etc. This, you see, is the mode in which I pass my time in Munich. I forgot, however, to say that every day at 12 o'clock I give little Mademoiselle L. an hour's instruction in double counterpoint and 4-part composition, etc., which makes me realize more than ever the stupidity and confusion of most masters and books on this subject. For nothing can be more clear than the whole thing when properly explained. She is one of the sweetest creatures I ever saw. Imagine a small, delicate-looking, pale girl with noble but not pretty features, so singular and interesting that it is difficult to turn your eyes from her, while all her gestures and every word are full of genius. She has the gift of composing songs and singing them in a way I never heard before, causing me the most unalloyed musical delight I ever experienced. When she is seated at the piano and begins one of the songs, the sounds are quite unique. The music floats strangely to and fro, and every note expresses the most profound and refined feeling. When she sings the first note in her tender tones, everyone present subsides into a quiet and thoughtful mood, and each, in his own way, is is deeply affected. If you could but hear her voice, so innocent, so unconsciously lovely, emanating from her inmost soul, and yet so tranquil. Last year the genius was all there. She had written no song that did not contain some bright flash of talent, and then M and I sounded forth her praises to the musical world. Still no one seemed to place much faith in us. But since that time, she has made the most remarkable progress. Those who are not affected by her present singing can have no feeling at all. But unluckily, it is now the fashion to beg the young girl to sing her songs, and then the lights are removed from the piano, in order that the society may enjoy the plaintive strains. This forms an unpleasant contrast, and repeatedly when I was to have played something after her, I was quite unable, and declined doing so. It is probable that she may one day be spoiled by all this praise, because she has no one to comprehend or to guide her, and, strangely enough, she is as yet entirely devoid of all musical cultivation. She knows very little and can scarcely distinguish good music from bad. In fact, except her own pieces, she thinks all else that she hears wonderfully fine. If she were at length to become satisfied, as it were, with herself, it would be all over with her. I have, for my part, done what I could, and implored her parents and herself in the most urgent manner to avoid society, and not to allow such divine genius to be wasted. Heaven grant that I may be successful. I may, perhaps, dear sisters, soon send you some of her songs that she has copied out for me, in token of her gratitude for my teaching her what she already knows from nature. And because I have really led her to good and solid music, I also play on the organ every day for an hour, but unfortunately I cannot practice properly, as the pedal is short of 5 upper notes, so that I cannot play any of Sebastian Bach's passages on it, but the stops are wonderfully beautiful, by the aid of which you can vary chorals. So I dwell with delight on the celestial, liquid tone of the instrument. Moreover, Fanny, I have here discovered the particular stops which ought to be used in Sebastian Bach's Schmuckedicht au lieb Ziel. They seem actually made for this melody, and sound so touching that a tremor invariably seizes me when I begin to play it. For the flowing parts, I have a flute stop of 8 feet, and also a very soft one of 4 feet, which continually floats above the choral. You have heard this effect in Berlin, but there is a keyboard for the choral with nothing but reed stops, so I employ a mellow oboe and a soft clarion, 4 feet, and a viola. These give the choral in subdued and touching tones, like distant human voices, singing from the depths of the heart. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, by the time you will have received this letter, I shall be on the Theresienwiese with 80,000 other people, so think of me there, and farewell, Felix. Munich, October 18th, 1831. Dear Father, pray forgive me for not having written to you for so long. The last few days previous to my concert were passed in such bustle and confusion that I really had not a moment's leisure. Besides, I preferred writing to you after my concert was over, that I might tell you all about it. Hence the long interval between this and my former letter. I write to you in particular today because it is so long since I have had a single line from you. I do beg you will soon write to me, if only to say that you are well, and to send me your kind wishes. You know this always makes me glad and happy. Therefore, excuse my addressing this letter, with all the little details of my concert, to you. My mother and sisters were desirous to hear them, but I was anxious to say how eagerly I hope for a few lines from you. Pray let me have them. It is a long time since you wrote to me. My concert took place yesterday, and was much more brilliant and successful than I expected. The affair went off well, and with much spirit. The orchestra played admirably, and the receipts for the benefit of the poor will be large. A few days after my former letter, I attended a general rehearsal, where the whole band were assembled, and in addition to the official invitation the orchestra had received, I was obliged to invite them verbally in a polite speech in the theatre. This, to me, was the most trying part of the whole concert. Still, I did not object to it, for I really wished to know the sensations of a man who gives a concert, and this ceremony forms part of it. I stationed myself therefore at the prompter's box, and addressed the performers very courteously, who took off their hats, and when my speech was finished, there was a general murmur of assent. On the following day there were upwards of 70 signatures to the circular. Immediately afterwards, I had the pleasure of finding that the chorus singers had sent one of their leaders to me, to ask if I had not not compose some chorus that I should like to be sung, in which case they would all be happy to sing it gratis. Although I had decided not to give more than 3 pieces of my composition, still the offer was very gratifying, and the hearty sympathy especially delighted me, for even the regimental musicians, whom I had to engage for the English horns and trumpets, positively refused to accept a single cruiser, and we had above 80 performers in the orchestra. Then came all the tiresome minor arrangements about advertisements, tickets, preliminary rehearsals, etc. And in addition to all this, it was the week of the October Festival. In Munich, the days and hours always glide past so very rapidly that when they are gone, it really seems as if they had never been. And this is more peculiarly the case during this October Festival. Every afternoon, about 3 o'clock, you repair to the spacious green Theresian Wies, which is swarming with people, and it is impossible to get away till the evening, for everyone finds acquaintances without end and something to talk about or to look at. A fat ox, target shooting, a race, or pretty girls in gold and silver caps, etc. Any affair you are engaged in can be concluded there, for the whole town is congregated on the meadow, and not till the mists begin to rise does the crowd disperse and return towards the Frauentherme. The people are in constant motion, running about in all directions, while the snowy mountains in the distance look clear and tranquil, each day giving promise of a bright morrow, and fulfilling that promise, and, what after all is the chief thing, none but careless happy faces to be seen, with the occasional exception perhaps of a few deputies, drinking coffee in the open air and discussing the lamentable condition of the people, while the people themselves are standing round them looking as happy as possible. On the first day, the king distributes the prizes himself, taking off his hat to each winner of a prize, and giving his hand to the peasants, or laying hold of their arms and shaking them. Now I think this all very proper, as here externally at least society appears more blended, but whether it sinks deep into the heart we can discuss together at some future time. I adhere to my first opinion. At all events, it is so far well that the absurd restraints of etiquette should not be too strictly observed outwardly, and so it is always something gained. My first rehearsal took place early on Saturday. We had about 32 violins, 6 double basses, and double sets of wind instruments, etc. But heaven knows why, the rehearsal went badly. I was forced to rehearse my symphony in C minor alone for 2 hours. My concerto did not go at all satisfactorily. We had only time to play over the Midsummer Night's Dream once, and even then so hurriedly that I wished to withdraw it from the bills. But Baumann would not hear of this, and assured me that they would do it better next time. I therefore was forced to wait in considerable anxiety for the next rehearsal. In the meantime, there was happily a great ball on Sunday evening, which was very enjoyable, so I recovered my spirits and arrived next morning at the general rehearsal in high good humor and with perfect confidence. I started off at once with the overture. We played it over again and again, till at last it went well, and we did the same with my concerto, so that the whole rehearsal was quite satisfactory. On my way to the concert at night, when I heard the rattling of the carriages, I began to feel real pleasure in the whole affair. The court arrived at 6:30. I took up my little English baton and conducted my symphony. The orchestra played magnificently, and with a degree of fire and enthusiasm that I never heard equaled under my direction. They all crashed in at the forte, and the scherzo was most light and delicate. It seemed to please the audience exceedingly, and the king was always the first to applaud. Then my fat friend Breting sang the air in A-flat major from Wee Withan, and the public shouted da capo, and we were in good humor and showed good taste. Breting was delighted, so he sang with spirit and quite beautifully. Then came my concerto. I was received with long and loud applause. The orchestra accompanied me well, and the composition had also its merits, and gave much satisfaction to the audience. They wished to recall me, in order to give me another round of applause, according to the prevailing fashion here, but I was modest, and would not appear. Between the parts, the king got hold of me, and praised me highly, asking all sorts of questions, and whether I was related to the Bartholdy in Rome, to whose house he was in the habit of going, because it was the cradle of modern art, etc. The second part commenced with the Midsummer Night's Dream, which went admirably and excited a great sensation. Then Baumann played, and after that we had the finale in A major from Ledoiska. I, however, did not hear either of these, as I was resting and cooling in the anteroom. When I appeared to extemporize, I was again enthusiastically received. The king had given me the theme of Non più andrai, on which I was to improvise. My former opinion is now fully confirmed, that it is an absurdity to extemporize in public. I have seldom felt so like a fool as when I took my place at the piano to present to the public the fruits of my inspiration. But the audience were quite contented, and there was no end of their applause. They called me forward again, and the queen said all that was courteous, but I was annoyed, for I was far from being satisfied with myself, and I am resolved never again to extemporize in public. It is both an abuse and an absurdity. So this is an account of my concert of the 17th, which is now among the things of the past. There were 1,100 people present, so the poor may well be satisfied. But enough of all this. Farewell. May every happiness attend you all. Felix. Paris, December 19th, 1831. Dear Father, receive my hearty thanks for your letter of the 7th, though I do not quite apprehend your meaning on some points, and also may differ from you, still I have no doubt that this will come all right when we talk things over together, especially if you permit me, as you have always hitherto done, to express my opinion in a straightforward manner. I allude chiefly to your suggestion that I should procure a libretto for an opera from some French poet, and then have it translated, and compose the music for the Munich stage. Above all, I must tell you how sincerely I regret that you have only now made known to me your views on this subject. I went to Dusseldorf, as you know, expressly to consult with Emmermann on the point. I found him ready and willing. He accepted the proposal, promising to send me the poem by the end of May at the latest. So I do not myself see how it is possible for me now to draw back. Indeed, I do not wish it, as I place entire confidence in him. I do not in the least understand what you allude to in your last letter about Emmermann and his incapacity to write an opera. Although I by no means agree with you in this opinion, still it would have been my duty to have settled nothing without your express sanction, and I could have arranged the affair by letter from here. I believed, however, that I was acting quite to your satisfaction when I made him my offer. In addition to this, some new poems that he read to me convinced me more than ever that he was a true poet, and supposing that I had an equal choice in merit, I would always decide rather in favor of a German than a French libretto. And lastly, he has fixed on a subject which has been long in my thoughts, and which, if I am not mistaken, my mother wished to see made into an opera. I mean Shakespeare's Tempest. I was therefore particularly pleased with this, so I shall doubly regret if you do not approve of what I have done. In any event, however, I entreat that you will neither be displeased with me, nor distrustful with regard to the work, nor cease to take any interest in it. From what I know of Emmermann, I feel assured I may expect a first-rate libretto. What I alluded to about his solitary life merely referred to his inward feelings and perceptions, for in other respects he is well acquainted with what is passing in the world. He knows what people like and what to give them, but above all he is a genuine artist, which is the chief thing. But I am sure I need not say that I will not compose music for any words I do not consider really good, or which do not inspire me, and for this purpose it is essential that I should have your approval. I intend to reflect deeply on the poem before I begin the music, the dramatic interest, or, in the best sense, the theatrical portion, I shall of course immediately communicate to you, and in short, look on the affair in the serious light it deserves. The first step, however, is taken, and I cannot tell you how deeply I should regret your not being pleased. There is, however, one thing which consoles me, and it is that if I were to rely on my own judgment, I would again act precisely as I have now done, though I have had an opportunity of becoming acquainted with a great deal of French poetry, and seeing it in the most favorable light. Pray pardon me for saying exactly what I think. To compose for the translation of a French libretto seems to me for various reasons impracticable, and I have an idea that you are in favor of it more on account of the success which it is likely to enjoy than for its own intrinsic merit. Moreover, I well remember how much you disliked the subject of the Muette de Portici, a Muette too who had gone astray, and of Wilhelm Tell, which the author seems almost most purposely to have rendered tedious. The success, however, these enjoy all over Germany does not assuredly depend on the work itself being either good or dramatic, for tell is neither, but on their coming from Paris, and having pleased there. Certainly there is one sure road to fame in Germany, that by Paris and London. Still, it is not the only one. This is proved not only by all Weber's works, but also by those of Spohr, whose Faust is here considered classical music, and which is to be given at the Great Opera House in London next season. Besides, I could not possibly take that course, as my great opera has been bespoken for Munich, and I have accepted the commission. I am resolved, therefore, to make the attempt in Germany, and to remain and work there so long as I can continue to do so, and yet maintain myself. For this I consider my first duty. If I find that I cannot do this, then I must leave it for London or Paris, where it is easier to get on. I see indeed where I should be better remunerated and more honored, and live more gaily, and at my ease, than in Germany, where a man must press forward and toil and take no rest. Still, if I can succeed there, I prefer the latter. None of the new libretti here would, in my opinion, be attended with any success whatever, if brought out for the first time on a German stage. One of the distinctive characteristics of them all is precisely of a nature that I should resolutely oppose, although the taste of the present day may demand it, and I quite admit that it may in general be more prudent to go the current than to struggle against it. I allude to that of immorality. In Robert le Diable, the nuns come one after the other to allure the hero of the piece, till at last the abbess succeeds in doing so. The same hero is conveyed by magic into the apartment of her whom he loves, and casts her from him in an attitude which the public here applauds, and probably all Germany will do the same. She then implores his mercy in a grand aria. In another opera, a young girl divests herself of her garments, and sings a song to the effect that next day at this time she will be married. All this produces effect, but I have no music for such things. I consider it ignoble, so if the present epoch exacts this style and considers it indispensable, then I will write oratorios. Another strong reason why it would prove impracticable is that no French poet would undertake to furnish me with a poem. Indeed, it is no easy matter to procure one from them for this stage, for all the best authors are overwhelmed with commissions. At the same time, I think it quite possible that I might succeed in getting one. Still, it never would occur to any of them to write a libretto for a German theater. In the first place, it would be much more feasible to give the opera here, and infinitely more rational too. In the second place, they would decline writing for any other stage than the French. In fact, they could not realize any other. Above all, it would be impossible to procure for them a sum equivalent to what they receive here from the theaters, and what they draw as their share from the part d'auteur. I know you will forgive me for having told you my opinion without reserve. You always allowed me to do so in conversation, so I hope you will not put a wrong construction on what I have written, and I beg you will amend my views by communicating your own. Your Felix. End of section 20.
Section 21 of Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Beeswaxcandle. Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland, translated by Grace Jane Wallace. December 20th to January 11th. Paris, December 20th, 1831. Dear Rebecca, I went yesterday to the Chambre des Députés, and I must now tell you about it. But what do you care about the Chambre des Députés? It is a political song, and you would rather hear whether I have composed any love songs, or bridal songs, or wedding songs. But it is a sad pity that no songs but political ones are composed here. I believe I never in my life passed 3 such unmusical weeks as these. I feel as if I never could again think of composing. This all rises from the juste milieu, but it is still worse to be with musicians, for they do not wrangle about politics, but lament over them. One has lost his place, another his title, a third his money, and they say this all proceeds from the milieu. Yesterday I saw the milieu, in a light grey coat, with a noble air, in the first place on the ministerial bench. He was sharply attacked by Monsieur Mauguin, who has a very long nose. Of course you don't care for all this, but what of that? I must have a chat with you. In Italy I was lazy, in Switzerland a wild student, in Munich a consumer of cheese and beer, and so in Paris I must talk politics. I intended to have composed various symphonies, and to have written some songs for certain ladies in Frankfurt, Düsseldorf, and Berlin, but as yet not a chance of it. Paris obtrudes herself, and as above all things I must now see Paris, so I am busily engaged in seeing it, and am dumb. Moreover, I am freezing with cold. Another drawback. I cannot contrive to make my room warm, and I am not to get another and warmer apartment till New Year's Day. In a dark little hole on the ground floor overlooking a small damp garden, with my feet like ice, how can I possibly write music? It is bitterly cold, and an Italian like myself is peculiarly susceptible. At this moment, a man outside my window is singing a political song to a guitar. I live a reckless life, out morning, noon, and night. Today, Bayeux. Tomorrow I go to some friends of the Bigots. The next day, Valentin. Monday, Fuld. Tuesday, Hille. Wednesday, Gérard. And the previous week it was just the same. In the forenoon I rush off to the Louvre, and gaze at the Raphaels and my favourite Titian. A person might well wish for a dozen more eyes to look at such a picture. Yesterday I was in the Chamber of Peers, who were engaged in pronouncing judgment on their own hereditary rights, and I saw Monsieur Pasquier's wig. The day before I paid 2 musical visits, to the grumbling Cherubini and the kind Hertz. There was a large signboard before the house, Manufacture de piano, par Henri Hertz, marchand des modes et des nouveautés. I thought this formed one, not observing that it was a notice of 2 different firms, so I went in below and found myself surrounded by gauze and lace and trimmings. So rather abashed, I asked where the pianos were. A number of Hertz's fair scholars with industrious faces were waiting upstairs. I sat down by the fire and read your interesting account of our dear father's birthday, and so forth. Hertz presently arrived and gave audience to his pupils. We were very loving, recalled old times, and besprinkled each other mutually with great praise. On his pianos is inscribed Médaille d'Or, Exposition de 1827. This was very imposing. From thence I went to Erard's, where I tried over his instruments, and remarked, written on them in large letters, Médaille d'Or, Exposition de 1827. My respect seemed to diminish. When I went home, I opened my own instrument by Pleyel, and to be sure, there also I saw in large letters Médaille d'Or, Exposition de 1827. The matter is like the title of Hofrat, but it is characteristic, and it is alleged that the chambers are about to discuss the following proposition. Tous les Français du sexe masculin ont des lieux naissance, le droit de porter l'ordre de la Légion d'honneur. And the permission to appear without the order can only be obtained by special services. You really scarcely see a man on the street without a bit of coloured ribbon, so it is no longer a distinction. Apropos, shall I be lithographed full length? Answer what you will. I don't intend to do it. One afternoon in Berlin, when I was standing unter den Linden before Schenk's shop, looking at H's and W's lithographs, I made a solemn vow to myself, unheard by man, that I would never allow myself to be hung up till I became a great man. The temptation in Munich was strong. There they wished to drape me with a Carbonaro cloak, a stormy sky in the background, and my facsimile underneath. But I happily got off by adhering to my principles. Here again I am rather tempted, for the likenesses are very striking. But I keep my vow. And if, after all, I never do become a great man, though posterity will be deprived of a portrait, it will have an absurdity the less. It is now the 24th, and we had a very pleasant evening at Bayeux yesterday. He plays beautifully, and had collected a very musical society of attentive ladies and enthusiastic gentlemen. and I have seldom been so well amused in any circle, or enjoyed such honours. It was the greatest possible delight to me to hear my quartet in E-flat major, dedicated to B.P., performed in Paris by Baillot's quartet, and they executed with fire and spirit. They commenced with a quintet by Boccherini, an old-fashioned peruke, but a very amiable old gentleman underneath it. The company then asked for a sonata of Bach's. We selected the one in A major. Old familiar tones dawned once more on me of the time when Baillot played it with Madame Bigot. We urged each other on. The affair became animated, and so thoroughly amused both us and our audience that we immediately commenced the one in E major, and next time we mean to introduce the 4 others. Then my turn came to play a solo. I was in the vein to extemporize successfully, and felt that I did so. The guests being now in a graver mood, I took 3 themes from the previous sonatas, and worked them up to my heart's content. It seemed to give immense pleasure to those present, for they shouted and applauded like mad. Then Baillot gave my quartet. His manner towards me has something very kind, and I was doubly pleased, as he is rather cold at first, and seldom makes advances to anyone. He appears a good deal depressed by the loss of his situation. I saw a number of old, well-known faces, and they asked after you all, and recalled many anecdotes of that former period. When I was passing through Louvain 2 years ago with my Liederspiel in my head and my injured knee, I seized the brass handle of a pump to prevent myself from falling, and when I returned this year in the same miserable diligence, driven by a postilion exactly similar with a big queue, the Liederspiel, my knee, and Italy were all things of the past. And yet the handle of the pump was still hanging there, as clean and brightly rubbed up as ever, having survived 1830 and all the revolutionary storms and remaining quite unchanged. This is sentimental. My father must not read it, for it is the old story of the past and the present which we discussed so eagerly one fine evening, and which recurs to me among the crowd here at every step. I thought of it at the Madeleine, and when I went to Aunt J's, and at the Hôtel des Princes, and at the gallery, which my father showed me 15 years ago, and when I saw the coloured signs which at that time impressed me exceedingly, and are now grown brown and shabby. Moreover, this is Christmas Eve, but I feel little interest in it, or in New Year's night either. Please God, another year may wear a very different aspect, and I will not then go to the theatre on Christmas Eve, as I am about to do tonight, to hear La Blache and Rossini for the first time. How little I care about it! I should much prefer Polichinelle and apples today, and I think it very doubtful whether the orchestra will play as pretty a symphony as my Kindersymphonie. I must be satisfied with it, however. I am now modulating into the minor key, a fault with which the École Allemande are often reproached, and as I profess not to belong to the latter, the French say I am cosmopolite. Heaven defend me from being anything of the kind. And now goodbye. 1,000 compliments from Bertin de Vaux, Giraud d'Alain, Dupont de Lure, Tracy, Sassy, Passy, and other kind friends. I had intended to have told you in this letter how Servette attacked the ministers, and how during this time a little émeute took place on the Pont Neuf, how I sat in the chambers along with Franck, in the midst of Saint-Simonien, how witty Dupin was, but no more at present. May you all be well and happy this evening, and thinking of me. Felix. Paris, December 28th, 1831. Dear Madam Fanny, for 3 months past I have been thinking of writing you a musical letter, but my procrastination has its revenge, for though I have been a fortnight here, I don't know whether I shall still be able to do so. I have appeared in every impossible mood here, that of an inquiring, admiring traveller, a Coscom, a Frenchman, and yesterday actually as a peer of France, but not yet as a musician. Indeed, there is little likelihood of the latter, for the aspect of music here is miserable enough. The concerts in the Conservatoire, which were my great object, probably will not take place at all, because the Commission of the Ministry wished to give a commission to the Commission of the Society to deprive a commission of professors of their share of the profits, on which the commission of the Conservatoire replied to the commission of the ministry that they might go and be hanged, suspended, and then they would not consent to it. The newspapers make some very severe comments on this, but you need not read them, as these papers are prohibited in Berlin. But you don't lose much by this. The Opera Comique is bankrupt, and so it has relâche since I came. At the Grand Opera they give only little operas, which amuse me, although they neither provoke nor excite me. Armida was the last great opera, but they gave it in 3 acts, and this was 2 years ago. Chiron's Institute is closed, the Chapelle Royale is gone out like a light, not a single mass is to be heard on Sundays in all Paris, unless accompanied by serpents. Malibran is to appear here next week for the last time. So much the better, say you. Retire within yourself, and write music for Ach Gott von Himmel, or a symphony, or the new violin quartet which you mentioned in your letter to me of the 28th, or any other serious composition. But this is even more impossible, for what is going on here is most deeply interesting, and entices you out, suggesting matter for thought and memory, and absorbing every moment of time. Accordingly, I was yesterday in the Chambre des Pairs, and counted along with them the votes, destined to abolish a very ancient privilege. Immediately afterwards I hurried off to the Théâtre Français, where Mars was to appear for the first time for a year past. She is fascinating beyond conception, a voice we shall never hear equalled, causing you to weep, and yet to feel pleasure in doing so. Today I must see Taglioni again, who along with Mars constitutes 2 graces. If I find a third in my travels, I mean to marry her. And afterwards I mean to go to Gérard's classical salon. I lately went to hear Lablache and Rubini, after hearing Odilon Barrot quarrel with the ministry. Having seen the pictures in the Louvre in the morning, I went to Berlioz. So what chance is there of living in retirement? The outer world is too tempting. There are moments, however, when my thoughts turn inwards, such as on that memorable evening when Lablache sang so beautifully, or on Christmas Day, when there were no bells and no festivities, or when Paul's letter came from London, inviting me to visit him next spring, the said spring to be passed in England. Then I felt that all that now interests me is merely superficial, that I am neither a politician, nor a dancer, nor an actor, nor a bel esprit, but a musicien. So I take courage, and am now writing a professional letter to my dear sister. My conscience smote me, especially when I read about your new music that you so carefully conducted on my father's birthday, and I reproached myself for not having said a single word to you about your previous composition. But I cannot let you off on that, my colleague. What the deuce made you think of setting your G-horn so high? Did you ever hear a G-horn take the high G without a squeak? Only put this to yourself. At the end of this introduction, when wind instruments come in, does not the following note stare you in the face? And do not these deep oboes growl away all pastoral feeling and all bloom? Do you not know that you ought to take out a license to sanction your writing the low B for oboes, and that it is only permitted on particular occasions, such as witches or some great grief? Is not the composer evidently in the A major air overloaded the voice by too many other parts, so that the delicate intention and the lovely melody of this otherwise charming piece, with all its beauties, is quite obscured and eclipsed? To speak seriously, however, this aria is very beautiful, and particularly fascinating. But I have a remark to make about your 2 choruses, which indeed applies rather to the text than to you. These 2 choruses are not sufficiently original. It sounds absurd, but my opinion is that it is the fault of the words that express nothing original. One single expression might have improved the whole, but as they now stand, they would be equally suitable for church music, a cantata, an offertorium, etc. Where, however, they are not of such universal application, as for example the lament at the end, they seem to be sentimental and not natural. The words of the last chorus are too material, mit dem kraftlosen Mund und der sich regenden Zunge. At the beginning of the aria alone are the words vigorous and spirited, and from them emanated the whole of your lovely piece of music. The choruses are of course fine, for they are written by you, But in the first place, it seems to me that they might be by any other good master. And secondly, as if they were not necessarily what they are, indeed as if they might have been differently composed. This arises from the poetry not imposing any particular music. I know that the latter is often the case with my own compositions, but though I am fully aware of the beam in my own eyes, I would fain extract the mote from yours to relieve you at once from its pressure. My résumé, therefore, is, I would advise you to be more cautious in the choice of your words, because after all, it is not everything in the Bible, even if it suits the theme, that is suggestive of music. But you have probably obviated these objections of mine in your new cantata before being aware of them, in which case I might as well have said nothing. So much the better if it be so, then you can prosecute me for defamation. So far as your music and composition are concerned, they quite suit my taste. The young lady's cloven foot nowhere peeps forth, and if I knew any Kapellmeister capable of writing such music, I would give him a place at my court. Fortunately, I know no such person, and there is no occasion to place you at my right hand at court, as you are there already. When do you mean to send me something new to cheer me? Pray do so soon. As far as regards myself, shortly after my arrival here I had one of those attacks of musical spleen, when all music, and more especially one's own, becomes actually hateful. I felt thoroughly unmusical. I did nothing but eat and sleep, and that revived me. F., to whom I complained of my state, instantly constructed a musical theory on the subject, proving that it could not be otherwise. I, however, think exactly the reverse. But though we are so entirely dissimilar, and have as many differences as a bushman and Caffre, still we like each other exceedingly. With L, too, I get on famously. He is very pleasing, and the most dilettante of all the dilettanti I ever met. He knows everything by heart, and plays wrong basses to them all. He is only deficient in arrogance, for with all his undeniable talent he is very modest and retiring. I am much with him, because he is a benevolent, kind-hearted man. We should thoroughly agree on all points if he would not consider me a doctrinaire, and persist in talking politics, a subject that I wish to avoid for at least 120 reasons, and chiefly because I don't in the least understand it. Besides, he delights in hitting at Germany and depreciating London in favour of Paris. Both these things are prejudicial to my constitution, and whoever assails that, I must defend it, and dispute with them. I was yesterday studying your new music, and enjoying it, when Kalkbrenner came in and played various new compositions. The man is quite romantic, purloins themes, ideas, and similar trifles from Hiller, writes pieces in F-sharp minor, practices every day for several hours, and is, as he always was, a knowing fellow. Every time I see him he inquires after my charming sister whom he likes so much, and who has such a fine talent for playing and composing. My invariable reply is that she has not given up music, that she is very industrious, and that I love her very much, all of which is true. And now farewell, dear sister. May you be well and happy, and may we meet at the new year. Felix. To Karl Immermann in Düsseldorf. Paris, July 11th, 1832. You permitted me to give you occasional tidings of myself, and since I came here I have daily intended to do so. The excitement here is, however, so great that till today I have never been able to write. When I contrast this constant whirl and commotion and the thousand distractions among a foreign people with your house and the garden and your warm winter room, the wish to exchange with me and to come here in my place often recurs to me, and I almost wish I had taken you at your word. You must indeed in that case have remained all the same in your winter room, so that I might come out to you through the snow, take my usual place in the corner, and listen to the Schwanritter, for there is more life in it than all the tumult here. In a word, I rejoice at the prospect of my return to Germany. Everything there is indeed on a small scale, and homely, if you will, but men live there. Men who know what art really is, who do not admire nor praise, in fact who do not criticize, but create. You do not admit this, but it is only because you are yourself among the number. I beg you will not, however, think that I am like one of those German youths with long hair, lounging about listlessly and pronouncing the French superficial and Paris frivolous. I only say all this because I now thoroughly enjoy and admire Paris, and am becoming better acquainted with it, and especially as I am writing to you in Düsseldorf. I have, on the contrary, cast myself headlong into the vortex, and do nothing the whole day but see new objects, the chambers of peers and deputies, pictures and theatres, Dio, Neo, Cosmo, and panoramas, constant parties, etc. Moreover, the musicians here are as numerous as the sands on the seashore, all hating each other, so each must be individually visited, and wary diplomacy is advisable, for they are all gossips, and what one says to another the whole corps know next morning. The days have thus flown past hitherto, as if only half as long as they were in reality, yet I have not been able to compose a single bar. In a few days, however, this exotic life will cease. My head is now dizzy from all I have seen and wondered at, but I then intend to collect my thoughts and set to work, when I shall feel once more happy and domesticated. My chief pleasure is going to the little theatres in the evening, because there French life and the French people are truly mirrored. The Gymnase Dramatique is my particular favourite, where nothing is given but small vaudeville. The extreme bitterness and deep animosity which pervade all these little comedies are most remarkable, and although partially cloaked by the prettiest phrases and the most lively acting, become only the more conspicuous. Politics everywhere play the chief part, which might have sufficed to make me dislike these theatres, for we have enough of them elsewhere. But the politics of the Gymnase are of a light and ironical description, referring to the occurrences of the day and to the newspapers, in order to excite laughter and applause, and at last you can't help laughing and applauding with the rest. Politics and sensuality are the two grand points of interest, round which everything circles, and in the many pieces I have seen, an attack on the ministry and a scene of seduction were never absent. The whole style of the vaudeville, introducing certain conventional music at the end of the scene in every piece, where the actors partly sing and partly declaim some couplets with a witty point, is thoroughly French. We could never learn this, nor in fact wish to do so, for this mode of connecting the wit of the day with an established refrain does not exist in our conversation, nor in our ideas. I cannot imagine anything more striking and effective, nor yet more prosaic. A great sensation has been recently caused here by a new piece at the Gymnase, Le Luthier de Lisbonne, which forms the delight of the public. A stranger is announced in the playbills. Scarcely does he appear when all the audience begin to laugh and to applaud, and you learn that the actor is a close imitation of Don Miguel in gestures, manner, and costume. He proceeds to announce that he is a king, and the fortune of the piece is made. The more stupid and uncivilized and uncouth the unknown appears, the greater is the enjoyment of the public, who allow none of his gestures or speeches to pass unobserved. He takes refuge from a riot in the house of this instrument-maker, who is the most devoted of all royalists, but unluckily the husband of a very pretty woman. One of Don Miguel's favourites has forced her to grant him a rendezvous for the ensuing night, and he begs the king, who arrives at this moment, to give him his aid, by causing the husband to be beheaded. Don Miguel replies, "Très volontiers," and while the luthier recognizes him and falls at his feet, beside himself with joy, Don Miguel signs his death warrant, but also that of his favourite, whom he means to replace with the pretty woman. At each enormity that he commits, we laugh and applaud, and are immensely delighted with the stupid stage Don Miguel. So ends the first act. In the second, it is supposed to be midnight, the pretty wife alone and agitated. Don Miguel jumps in at the window, and does all in his power to gain her favour, making her dance and sing to him. But she cannot endure him, and falls at his feet, imploring him to spare her. On which he seizes her and drags her repeatedly round the stage, and if she did not make a snatch at a knife, and then a sudden knocking ensue, she might have been in a bad plight. At the close, the worthy luthier rescues the king from the hands of the French soldiery, who had just arrived, and of whose valour and love of liberty he has a great horror. so the piece ends happily. A little comedy followed, where the wife betrays her husband and has a lover, and another where the man is faithless to his wife and is maintained by his mistress. This is succeeded by a satire on the new constructions in the Tuileries, and on the ministry, and so it goes on. I cannot say how it may be at the French Opera, for it is bankrupt, so there has been no acting there since I came. In the Académie Royale, however, Meyerbeer's Robert le Diable is played every night with great success. The house is always crowded, and the music has given general satisfaction. There is an expenditure of all possible means of producing stage effect that I never saw equalled on any stage. All who can sing, dance, or act in Paris sing, dance, and act on this occasion. The sujet is romantic, that is, the devil appears in the piece. This is quite sufficient romance and imagination for the Parisians. It is, however, very bad. Were it not for 2 brilliant scenes of seduction, it would produce no effect whatever. The devil is a very poor devil, and appears in armour, for the purpose of leading astray his son Robert, a Roman knight who loves a Sicilian princess. He succeeds in inducing him to stake his money and all his personal property, that is, his sword, at dice, and then makes him commit sacrilege, giving him a magic branch which enables him to penetrate into the princess's apartment and renders him irresistible. The son does all this with apparent willingness, but when at the end he is to assign himself to his father, who declares that he loves him and cannot live without him, the devil, or rather the poet's scribe, introduces a peasant girl who has in her possession the will of Robert's deceased mother, and reads in the document, which makes him doubt the story he has been told. So the devil is obliged to sink down through a trapdoor at midnight, with his purpose unfulfilled, on which Robert marries the princess, and the peasant girl, it seems, is intended to represent the principle of good. The devil is called Bertram. I cannot imagine how any music could be composed on such a cold, formal extravaganza as this, and so the opera does not satisfy me. It is throughout frigid and heartless, and where this is the case it produces no effect on me. The people extol the music, but where warmth and truth are wanting, I have no test to apply. Michael Beer set off today for Havre. It seems he intends to compose poetry there, and I now remember that when I met you one day at Chateau's, and mentioned that he was no poet, your rejoinder was, "That is a matter of taste." I seldom see Heine, because he is entirely absorbed in liberal ideas and in politics. He has recently published 60 Frühlingslieder. Very few of them seem to me either genuine or truthful, but these few are indeed inimitable. Have you read them? They appeared in the 2nd volume of the Reisebilder. Börner intends to publish some new volumes of letters. He and I are full of enthusiasm for Malibran and Taglioni. All these gentlemen are abusing and reviling Germany, and all that is German, and yet they cannot speak even tolerable French. I think this rather provoking. Pray excuse my having sent you so much gossip, and for writing to you on such a disreputable margin of paper. But it is long since we met, and as for a time I could see you every day, it has become quite a necessity to write to you, so you must not take it amiss. You once promised to send me a few lines in reply. I don't know whether I may venture to remind you of this, but I should really be glad to hear how you pass your time, and what novelty a certain cupboard in the corner contains. How you get on with Merlin, and my Schwanritter, the sound of which still vibrates in my ears like sweet music. And also whether you sometimes think of me, and of next May and the Tempest. It is certainly expecting a good deal to ask you for an early reply to my letter, but I fear that you had enough of the first, and would rather not receive a second. Therefore I take courage and beg for an answer to this one. But I need not have asked this, for you usually guess my wishes before I can utter them, and if you are as kindly disposed towards me now as you were then, you will fulfil this desire of mine as you did all the others. Yours, Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy. End of section 21. Section 22 of Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Beeswaxcandle. Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland, translated by Grace Jane Wallace. January 14th to February 21st. Paris, January the 14th, 1832. I now first begin to feel at home here, and really to know Paris. It is indeed the most singular and amusing place imaginable, but for one who is no politician, it does not possess so much interest. So I have become a doctrinaire. I read my newspaper every morning, form my own opinion about peace and war, and only among friends confess that I know nothing of the matter. This is, however, not the case with F., who is completely absorbed in the vortex of dilettantism and dogmatism, and really believes himself to be quite adapted to be a minister. It's a sad pity, for nothing good will ever come of it. He has sufficient sense to be always occupied, but not enough to conduct any affair. He is a dilettante on all points, and he has a clever knack of criticizing others, but he produces nothing. We continue on the same intimate terms, meeting every day and liking each other's society, but inwardly we remain strangers. I suspect that he writes for the public papers. He is very much with Heine, and chatters abuse against Germany like a magpie. All this I much dislike, and as I really have a sincere regard for him, it worries me. I suppose I must try to become accustomed to it, but it is really too sad to know where a person is deficient, and yet to be unable to remedy their defects. Moreover, he grows visibly older, so this irregular, unoccupied life is the less suitable for him. A has left his parents' house and gone to the Rue Monsigny, where body and soul are equally engrossed. I have in my possession an appeal to mankind from P, in which he makes his confession of faith, and invites everyone to surrender a share of his property, however small, to the Saint-Simonians, calling on all artists to devote their genius in future to this religion, to compose better music than Rossini or Beethoven, to build temples of peace, and to paint like Raphael or David. I have 20 copies of this pamphlet, which P desired me, dear father, to send to you. I rest satisfied by sending you one, which you will find quite enough, and even that one by some private hand, of course. It is a bad sign of the state of the public mind here that such a monstrous doctrine, in such detestable prose, should ever have existed or impressed others. For it appears that the students of the Polytechnic School take considerable interest in it. It is difficult to say how far it may be carried, where there is temptation offered on every side, promising honour to one, fame to another, to me an admiring public, and to the poor money, while by their cold estimate of talent they check all effort and all progress. And then their ideas as to universal brotherhood, their disbelief in hell and the devil and eternal perdition, and of the annihilation of all egotism, ideas which in our country spring from nature and prevail in every part of Christendom, and without which I should not wish to live, but which they, however, regard as a new invention and discovery, constantly repeating that they mean to transform the world and to render mankind happy. A coolly tells me that he does not require to improve himself, but others only, because he is not at all imperfect, but on the contrary perfect. They not only praise and compliment each other, but all those whom they wish to gain over, extolling any talent or capability you may possess, and lamenting that such great powers should be lost by adhering to the old-fashioned notions of duty, vocation, and action, as they were formerly interpreted. When I listen to all of this, it does seem to me a melancholy mystification. I attended a meeting last Sunday, where all the fathers sat in a circle. Then came the principal father and demanded their reports, praising and blaming them, addressing the assembly, and issuing his commands. To me, it was quite awful. A has completely renounced his parents, and lives with the fathers, his disciples, and is endeavouring to procure a loan for their benefit. But enough of this subject. A Pole gives a concert next week where I am to play at a composition for 6 performers, along with Kalkbrenner, Hiller, and company. Do not be surprised, therefore, if you see my name mutilated, as in the Messager lately, when the death of Professor Hegel was announced from Berlin, and all the papers copied it. I have set to work again and live most agreeably. I have not yet been able to write to you about the theatres, although they occupy me very much. How plain are the symptoms of bitterness and excitement, even in the most insignificant farce. How invariably everything bears a reference to politics. How completely what is called the romantic school has infected all the Parisians. For they think of nothing on the stage now but the plague, the gallows, the devil, etc., one striving to outstrip the other in horrors and in liberalism. In the midst of these misères and fooleries, how charming is a talent like that of Leontine Fay, who is the perfection of grace and fascination, and remains unsullied by the absurdities she is compelled to utter and to act. How strange all these contrasts are. But this I reserve for future discussion. Felix. Paris, January 21st, 1832. In every letter of yours I receive a little hit, because my answers are not very punctual, and so I reply without delay to your questions, dear Fanny, with regards to the new works that I am about to publish. It occurred to me that the octet and the quintet might make a very good appearance among my works, being in fact better than many compositions that already figure there. As the publication of these pieces costs me nothing, but on the contrary I derive profit from them, and not wishing to confuse their chronological order, my idea is to publish the following pieces at Easter: Quintet and Octet, the latter also arranged as a duet, Midsummer Night's Dream, 7 songs without words, 6 songs with words. On my return to Germany, 6 pieces of sacred music, and finally, if I can get anyone to print it and to pay for it, the symphony in D minor. As soon as I have performed Mir Stille at my concert in Berlin, it will also appear. I cannot, however, bring out the Hebrides here, because as I wrote to you at the time, I do not consider it finished. The middle movement forte in D major is very stupid, and the whole modulations savour more of counterpoint than of train oil and seagulls and salt fish, and it ought to be exactly the reverse. I like the piece too well to allow it to be performed in an imperfect state, and I hope soon to be able to work at it, and to have it ready for England and the Michaelmas fair at Leipzig. You inquire also why I do not compose the Italian symphony in A major, because I am composing the Saxon overture in A minor, which is to precede the Walpurgis night, that the work may be played with all due honour at the said Berlin concert, and elsewhere. You wish me to remove to the Marais, and to write the whole day. My dear child, that would never do. I have at the most only the prospect of 3 months to see Paris, so I must throw myself into the stream. Indeed, this is why I came. Everything here is too bright and too attractive to be neglected. It rounds off my pleasant travelling reminiscences, and forms a fine colossal keystone. So I consider that to see Paris is at this moment my chief vocation. The publishers, too, are standing on each side of me like veritable Satans, demanding music for the piano, and offering to pay for it. By heavens, I don't know whether I shall be able to withstand this, or write some kind of trio. For I hope you believe me to be superior to the temptation of a potpourri. But I should like to compose a couple of good trios. On Thursday, the first rehearsal of my overture takes place, which is to be performed in the second concert at the Conservatoire. In the third, my symphony in D minor is to follow. Habeneck talks of 7 or 8 rehearsals, which would be very welcome to me. Moreover, I am also to play something at Erard's concert, so I shall play my Munich concerto, but I must practice it well. Then a note is lying beside me. Le Président du Conseil, Ministre de l'Intérieur, et Madame Casimir-Prien, etc., on Monday evening to a ball. This evening there is to be music at Habeneck's, tomorrow at Schlesinger's. Tuesday, the first public soirée at Bayeux's. On Wednesday, Hiller plays his concerto at the Hôtel de Ville, and this always lasts till past midnight. Let those who like it lead a solitary life. These are all things that cannot be refused. So when am I to compose? In the forenoon? Yesterday, first Hiller came, then Kalkbrenner, then Habeneck. The day before that came Bayo, Eichtal, and Rodriguez. Perhaps very early in the morning. Well, I do compose then, so you are confuted. P was with me yesterday, talking Saint-Simeonism, and either from a conviction of my stupidity or my shrewdness, he made me disclosures which shocked me so much that I resolved never again to go to either him or to his confederates. This morning, Hiller rushed in and told me he had just witnessed the arrest of the Saint-Simeonians. He wished to hear their orations, but the fathers did not come. All of a sudden, soldiers made their way in, and requested those present to disperse as quickly as possible, inasmuch as Monsieur Enfantin and the others had been arrested in the Rue Monsignor. A party of National Guards are placed in the street, and other soldiers marched up there. Everything is sealed up, and now the procès will begin. My B minor quartet, which is lying in the Rue Monsignor, is also sealed up. The Adagio alone is in the style of the Juste Milieu, all the other parts mouvement. I suppose I shall eventually be obliged to play it before a jury. I was lately standing beside the Abbé Badin at a large party, listening to the performance of my quartet in A minor. At the last movement, my neighbour pulled my coat and said, "Il est là dans une de ses symphonies." "Qui?" said I, rather embarrassed. "Beethoven, l'auteur de ces quatuors," he said with a consequential air. This was a very doubtful compliment. But is it not famous that my quartet should be played in the classes of the Conservatoire, and that the pupils there are practising off their fingers to play Ist es wahr? I've just come from Saint-Sulpice, where the organist showed off his organ to me. It sounded like a full chorus of old women's voices. But they maintain it is the finest organ in Europe, if it were only put into proper order, which would cost 30,000 francs. The effect of the canto fermo, accompanied by a serpent, those who have not heard it could hardly conceive, and clumsy bells are ringing all the time. The post is going, so I must conclude my gossip, or I must go on in this manner till the day after tomorrow. I've not yet told you that Bach's Passion is announced for performance in London at Easter, in the Italian Opera House. Yours, Felix. Paris, February the 4th, 1832. You will, I am sure, excuse my writing you only a few words today. 'Twas but yesterday that I heard of my irreparable loss. Many hopes and a pleasant bright period of my life have departed with him, and I never can again feel so happy. I must now set about forming new plans, and building fresh castles in the air. The former ones are irrevocably gone, for he was interwoven with them all. I shall never be able to think of my boyish days, nor of the ensuing ones without connecting him with them, and I had hoped, till now, that it might be the same for the future. I must endeavour to inure myself to this, but I can recall no one thing without being reminded of him. I shall never hear music, or write it, without thinking of him. All this makes the rending asunder of such a tie doubly distressing. The former epoch has now wholly passed away, but not only do I lose that, but also the man I so sincerely loved. If I never had any especial reason for loving him, or if I no longer had such reasons, I must have loved him all the same, even without a reason. He loved me too, and the knowledge that there was such a man in the world, one in whom you could repose, and who lived to love you, and whose wishes and aims were identical with your own. This is all over. It is the most severe blow I have ever received, and never can I forget him. This was the celebration of my birthday. When I was listening to Bayo on Wednesday, and said to Hiller that I knew only one man who could play the music I loved for me, L was standing beside me, and knew what had happened, but did not give me the letter. He was not aware, indeed, that yesterday was my birthday, but he broke it to me by degrees yesterday morning, and then I recalled previous anniversaries, and took a review of the past, as everyone should on his birthday. I remembered how invariably on this day he arrived with some special gift which he had long thought of, and which was always as pleasing and agreeable and welcome as himself. The day was a melancholy one to me. I could neither do anything nor think of anything but the one subject. Today I've compelled myself to work and succeeded. My overture in A minor is finished. I think of writing some pieces here which will be well remunerated. I beg you will tell me every particular about him, and every detail, no matter how trifling. It will be a comfort to me to hear of him once more. The octet parts, so neatly copied by him, are lying before me at this moment, and remind me of him. I hope shortly to recover my usual equanimity, and to be able to write to you in better spirits and at more length. A new chapter in my life has begun, but as yet it has no title. Your Felix. Paris, February the 13th, 1832. I am now leading a quiet, pleasant life here. Neither my present frame of mind nor the pleasures of society tempt me to enter into gaiety. Here, and indeed everywhere else, society is uninteresting and not improving, and owing to the late hours, monopolizing a great deal of time. I do not refuse, however, when there is to be good music. I will write all the particulars to Zelter of the first concert in the Conservatoire. The performers there play quite admirably, and in so finished a style that it is indeed a pleasure to hear them. They delight in it themselves, and each takes the greatest possible trouble. The leader is an energetic, experienced musician, so they cannot fail to go well together. Tomorrow my A minor quartet is to be performed in public. Cherubini says of Beethoven's later music, "Ça me fait étonner," and so I think it probable that the whole public will sneeze tomorrow. The performers are Bayeux, Sauzet, Orhan, and Norblin, the best here. My overture in A minor is completed. It represents bad weather. A few days ago I finished an introduction where it thaws and spring arrives. I have counted the sheets of the Walpurgis Night, revised the 7 numbers a little, then boldly written underneath, Milan, July, Paris, February. I think it will please you. I must now write an adagio for my quintet without delay. The performers are loudly calling for one, and they are right. I do wish you could hear a rehearsal of my Midsummer Night's Dream at the Conservatoire, where they play it most beautifully. It is not yet certain whether it will be ready by next Sunday. There are to be 2 more rehearsals before then, but as yet it has only been twice played over. I think, however, that it will do, and I would rather it was given on Sunday than at the 3rd concert, because I am to play on behalf of the poor on the 26th, something of Weber's, and on the 27th at Erard's concert, my Munich concerto, and at other places, and I should like my composition to appear first at the Conservatoire. I am also to play there, and the members are anxious that I should give them a sonata of Beethoven's. It may seem bold, but I prefer his concerto in G major, which is quite unknown here. I look forward with the utmost delight to the symphony in D minor, which is to be rehearsed next week. I certainly never dreamt that I should hear it in Paris for the first time. I often visit the theatre, where I see a great display of wit and talent, but a degree of immorality that almost exceeds belief. It is supposed that no lady can go to the gymnase. Still they do go. Depict me to yourself as reading Notre Dame, dining with one or other of my acquaintances every day, and taking advantage of the lovely bright spring weather after 3 o'clock to take a walk and to pay a few visits, and to look at the gaily dressed ladies and gentlemen in the splendid gardens of the Tuileries. Then you will have my day in Paris. Adieu, Felix. Paris, February the 21st, 1832. Almost every letter that I receive from you now announces some sad loss. Yesterday I got the one in which you told me about poor you, whom I shall no longer find with you. So this is not a time for idle talk. I feel that I must work and strive to make progress. I have composed a grand adagio as an intermezzo for the quintet. It is called Nachruf, and it occurred to me, as I had to compose something for Bayeux, who plays so beautifully, and is so kindly disposed towards me, and who wishes to perform it in public, and yet he is only a recent acquaintance. 2 days ago my overture to the Midsummer Night's Dream was given for the first time at a concert in the Conservatoire. caused me great pleasure, for it went admirably, and seemed also to please the audience. It is to be repeated at one of the ensuing concerts, and my symphony, which has been rather delayed on this account, is to be rehearsed on Friday or Saturday. In the 4th or 5th concert, I am to play Beethoven's Concerto in G major. The musicians are all amazement at the honours conferred on me by the Conservatoire. They played my A minor quartet wonderfully last Tuesday, with such fire and precision that it was delightful to listen to them, and as I can never again hear Ritz, I shall probably never hear it better given. It appeared to make a great impression on the audience, and at the scherzo they were quite uproarious. It is now high time, dear father, to write you a few words with regard to my travelling plans, and on this occasion in a more serious strain than usual, for many reasons. I must first, in taking a general view of the past, refer to what you design to be the chief object of my journey, desiring me strictly to adhere to it. I was closely to examine the various countries, and to fix on the one where I wished to live and to work. I was further to make known my name and capabilities, in order that the people among whom I resolved to settle should receive me well, and not be wholly ignorant of my career. And finally, it was to take advantage of my own good fortune and your kindness to press forward in my subsequent efforts. It is a happy feeling to be able to say that I believe this has been the case. Always excepting those mistakes which are not discovered until too late, I think I have fulfilled the appointed object. People now know that I exist, and that I have a purpose, and any talent that I display they are ready to approve and to accept. They have made advances to me here, and proposed to take my music, which they seldom do, as all the others, even Onslow, have been obliged to offer their compositions. The London Philharmonic have requested me to perform something new of my own there on the 10th of March. I also got the commission from Munich without taking any step whatever to obtain it, and indeed not till after my concert. It is my intention to give a concert here, if possible, and certainly in London in April, if the cholera does not prevent my going there, and this on my own account, in order to make money. I hope, therefore, I may say that I have fulfilled this part of your wish, that I should make myself known to the public before returning to you. Your injunction, too, to make choice of the country that I prefer to live in, I have equally performed, at least in a general point of view. That country is Germany. This is a point on which I have now quite made up my mind. I cannot yet, however, decide on the particular city, for the most important of all, which for various reasons has so many attractions for me, I have not yet thought of in this light. I allude to Berlin. On my return, therefore, I must ascertain whether I can remain and establish myself there, according to my views and wishes, after having seen and enjoyed other places. This is also why I do not endeavour to get the commission for an opera here. If I compose really good music, which in these days is indispensable, it will be both understood and valued in Germany. This has been the case with all the good operas there. If I compose indifferent music, it will be quickly forgotten in Germany, but here it would be often performed and extolled and sent to Germany, and given there on the authority of Paris, as we daily see. But I do not choose this. If I am not capable of composing good music, I have no wish to be praised for it. So I shall first try Germany, and if things go so badly that I can no longer live there, I can then have recourse to some foreign country. Besides, few German theatres are so bad or in so dilapidated a condition as the Opera Comique here. One bankruptcy succeeds another. When Cherubini is asked why he does not allow his operas to be given there, he replies, "Je ne sais pas donner des opéras sans chœur, sans orchestre, sans chanteur et sans décoration." The Grand Opera has bespoken operas for years to come, so there is no chance of anything being accepted by it for the next 3 or 4 years. In the meantime, therefore, I intend to return to you to write my Tempest and to see how it succeeds. The plan, therefore, dear father, that I wish to lay before you is this: to remain here till the end of March, or the beginning of April. The invitation to the Philharmonic for the 10th of March I have of course declined, or rather postponed. Then to go to London for a couple of months. If the Rhenish Musical Festival takes place, to which I am summoned, I shall go to Düsseldorf, and if not, return direct to you by the shortest road, and be by your side in the garden soon after Whitsunday. Farewell, Felix. End of section 22.
Section 23 of Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claudia Caldi. Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland, translated by Grace Jane Wallace, March 15th, June 1st. Paris, March 15th, 1832. Dear Mother, this is the 15th of March, 1832. May every happiness and good attend you on this day. You prefer receiving my letter on your birthday to its being written on the day itself, but forgive me for saying that I cannot reconcile myself to this. My father said that no one could tell what might occur subsequently. Therefore, the letter ought to arrive on the anniversary of the day. But then I have this feeling in double measure, as I neither in that case know what is to occur to you on that day, nor to myself. But if your birthday be actually arrived, then I almost feel as if I were beside you, though you cannot hear my congratulations, but I can then send them to you without any other solicitude than that of absence. This too will soon be over, please God. May He preserve you and all at home happily to me. I have now begun to throw myself in right earnest into a musical life, and as I know this must be satisfactory to you, I will write some details, for a letter and a sketchbook that I wished to send you some days ago by Mozartjr de Camp are still waiting, like all Paris, for the departure of the Marshal, which does not, however, take place. If the letter and the book do eventually reach you through this man, pray give a kind reception to the whole consignment, but especially to the man, Count Petrie, for he is one of the most friendly and amiable persons I ever met with. I had told you in that letter that I am to play Beethoven's Concerto in G major 2 days hence in the Conservatoire, and that the whole court are to be present for the first time at the concert. Kay is ready to poison me from envy. He at first tried by 1,000 intrigues to prevent my playing altogether, and when he heard that the Queen was actually coming, he did everything in his power to get me out of the way. Happily, all the other members of the Conservatoire, the all-powerful Habeneck in particular, are my faithful allies, and so he signally failed. He is the only musician here who acts unkindly and hypocritically towards me, and though I never placed much confidence in him, still it is always a very painful sensation to know that you are in the society of a person who hates you, but is careful not to show it. The 17th. I could not finish this letter because during the last few days the incessant music I told you of has been so overwhelming that I really scarcely knew which way to turn. A mere catalogue, therefore, of all I have done and have still to do must suffice for today, and at the same time plead my excuse. I have just come back from a rehearsal at the Conservatoire. We rehearsed steadily, twice yesterday, and today almost everything repeated, but now all goes swimmingly. If the audience tomorrow are only half as enchanted as the orchestra today, we shall do well, for they shouted loudly for the Adagio da Capo, and Habeneck made them a little speech, to point out to them that at the close there was a solo bar which they must be so good as to wait for. You would be gratified to see all the little kindnesses and courtesies the latter shows me. At the end of each movement of the symphony he asks me if there is anything I do not approve of, so I have been able for the first time to introduce into the French orchestra some favorite nuances of my own. After the rehearsal, Bayot played my octet in his class, and if any man in the world can play it, he is the man. His performance was finer than I ever heard it, and so was that of Varane, Noblen, and the others, who all attacked the piece with the most ardent energy and spirit. Besides all this, I must finish the arrangement of the overture and the octet, and revise the quintet, as Simrock has put it. I must write out Lieder, and enjoy the author's delight of working up my B minor quartet, for it is to be brought out here by 2 different publishers, who have requested me to make some alterations before it is published. Finally, I have soirées every evening. Tonight Borers, tomorrow a fête with all the violin gamin of the Conservatoire, next day Rothschild, Tuesday the Société des Beaux-Arts, Wednesday my octet at the Abbé Bardin's, Thursday my octet at Madame Quienet's, Friday a concert at Herard's, Sunday a concert at Léo's, and lastly, on Monday, laugh if you choose, my octet is to be performed in a church at a funeral mass in commemoration of Beethoven. This is the strangest thing the world ever yet saw, but I could not refuse, and I in some degree enjoy the thoughts of being present when low mass is read during the scherzo. I can scarcely imagine anything more absurd than a priest at the altar and my scherzo going on. It is like travelling incognito. Last of all, Bayeux gives a grand concert on the 7th of April, and so I have promised him to remain here till then and to play a concerto of Mozart's for him and some other piece. On the 8th I take my place in the diligence and set off to London, but before doing so I shall have heard my symphony in the Conservatoire and sold various pieces, and shall leave this, rejoicing in the friendly reception I have met with from the musicians here. Farewell, Felix. Paris, March 31st, 1832. Pray forgive my long silence, but I had nothing cheering to communicate, and am always very unwilling to write gloomy letters. Indeed, this being the case, I had better still have remained silent, for I am in anything but a gay mood. But now that we have the spectre here, I mean to write to you regularly, that you may know that I am well and pursuing my work. The sad news of Geddes' loss makes me feel poor indeed. What a blow to the country! It is another of those mournful events connected with my stay here, which will always recur to my mind at the very name of Paris, and not all the kindness I have received, nor the tumult and excitement, nor the life and gaiety here can ever efface this impression. May it please God to preserve me from still worse tidings, and grant us all a happy meeting. This is the chief thing. Various circumstances have induced me to delay my departure from here for at least a fortnight, that is, till the middle of April, and the idea of my concert has begun to revive in my mind. I mean to accomplish it too, if the cholera does not deter people from musical or any other kind of reunion. We shall know this in the course of a week, and in any case I must remain here till then. I believe, however, that everything will go on in the usual regular course, and Figaro proved to be in the right, who wrote an article called Enfoncer le choléra, in which he says that Paris is the grave of all reputations, for no one there ever admired anything. Yawning at Paganini, he does not seem to please much this time, and not even looking round in the street at an emperor or a day, so possibly this melody might also lose its formidable reputation there. Count Pertuis has no doubt told you of my playing at the Conservatoire. The French say that it was un beau succès, and the audience were pleased. The Queen, too, sent me all sorts of fine compliments on the subject. On Saturday I am again to play twice in public. My octet in church, on Monday last, exceeded in absurdity anything the world ever saw or heard of. While the priest was officiating on the altar during the scherzo, it really sounded like Fliegen, Schnauz und Mücken als verfluchte Dilettanten. The people, however, considered it very fine, sacred music. I am indeed delighted, dear father, that my quartet in B minor pleases you. It is a favourite of mine, and I like to play it, although the adagio is much too cloying. Still, the scherzo that follows has all the more effect. I can see that you seem rather inclined to deride my A minor quartet when you say that there is a piece of instrumental music which has made you rack your brains to discover the composer's thoughts, when, in fact, he probably had no thoughts at all. I must defend the work, for I love it, but it certainly depends very much on the way in which it is executed, and one single musician who could perform it with zeal and sympathy, as Stobbart did, would make a vast difference. Your Felix. Extract from a letter from London. London, April 27th, 1832. I wish I could only describe how happy I feel to be here once more, how much I like everything, and how gratified I am by the kindness of old friends. But as it is all going on at this moment, I must be brief for today. I have also a number of people to seek out whom I have not yet seen, whilst I have been living with Klingemann, Rosen, and Moscheles in as close intimacy as if we had never been parted. They form the nucleus of my present suitor. We see each other every day. It is such a pleasure to me to be once more with good, earnest men and true friends, with whom I do not require to be on my guard, nor to study them either. Moscheles and his wife showed me a degree of touching kindness, which I value the more as my regard for them increases, and then the feeling of restored health, as if I lived afresh and had come anew into this world, and all these are combined. May 11th. I cannot describe to you the happiness of these first weeks here. As from time to time every evil seems to accumulate, as it did during my winter in Paris, where I lost some of my most beloved friends, and never felt at home, and at last became very ill, so the reverse sometimes occurs. And thus it is in this charming country, where I am once more amongst friends, and am well, and among well-wishers, and enjoy in the fullest measure the sensation of returning health. Moreover, it is warm. The lilacs are in bloom, and music is going on. Only imagine how pleasant all this is. I must really describe one happy morning last week. Of all the flattering demonstrations I have hitherto received, it is the one which has most touched and affected me, and perhaps the only one which I shall always recall with fresh pleasure. There was a rehearsal last Saturday at the Philharmonic, where, however, nothing of mine was given, my overture not being yet written out. After Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, during which I was in a box, I wished to go into the room to talk to some old friends. Scarcely, however, had I gone down below, when one of the orchestra called out, "There is Mendelssohn!" On which they all began shouting and clapping their hands to such a degree that for a time I really did not know what to do, and when this was over, another called out, "Welcome to him," on which the same uproar recommenced, and I was obliged to cross the room and to clamber into the orchestra and return thanks. Never can I forget it, for it was more precious to me than any distinction, as it showed me that the musicians loved me and rejoiced at my coming, and I cannot tell you what a glad feeling this was. May 18th. Dear Father, I have received your letter of the 9th. God grant that Selter may by this time be safe and out of danger. You say, indeed, that he already is so, but I shall anxiously expect your next letter to see the news of his recovery confirmed. I have dreaded this ever since Goethe's death, but when it actually occurs, it is a very different thing. May heaven avert it. Pray tell me also what you mean by saying, "There is no doubt that Selter both wishes and requires to have you with him, because, at all events for the present, it is quite impossible for him to carry on the academy, whence it is evident that if you do not undertake it, another must." Has Selter expressed this wish to you, or do you only imagine that he entertains it? If the former were the case, I would instantly, on receiving your reply, write to Zelter and offer him every service in my power, of every kind, and try to relieve him from all his labours for as long a period as he desired, and this it certainly would be my duty to do. I intended to have written to Liechtenstein before my return about the proposal formerly made to me, but of course I have given up all thoughts of doing so at present, for on no account would I assume that Zelter could not resume his duties, and even in that event I could not reconcile myself to discuss the matter with any one but himself. Every other mode of proceeding I should consider unfair towards him. If, however, he requires my services, I am ready and shall rejoice if I can be of any use to him, but still more so if he does not want me and is entirely recovered. I beg you will write me a few words on this subject. I must now inform you of my plans and engagements till I leave this. Yesterday I finished the Rondeau Brillant, and I am to play it this day week at Maury's evening concert. The day after I rehearse my Munich concerto at the Philharmonic, and play it on Monday the 28th at their concert. On the 1st of June, Moscheles' concert, where with him I play a concerto of Mozart's for 2 pianos and conduct my 2 overtures, the Hebrides and the Midsummer Night's Dream. Finally, the last Philharmonic is on the 11th, where I am to conduct some piece. I must finish the arrangement for Kramer and some lieder for the piano, also some songs with English words, besides some German ones for myself, for after all it is spring and the lilacs are in bloom. Last Monday the Hebrides was given for the first time in the Philharmonic. It went admirably and sounded very quaint among a variety of Rossini pieces. The audience received both me and my work with extreme kindness. This evening is Mr. Vaughan's concert, but I am sure you must be quite sick of hearing of so many concerts, so I conclude. Norwood, Surrey, May 25th. These are hard times, and many are laid low. May it please God to preserve you all to me, and to grant us a joyful meeting. You will receive this letter from the same villa whence I wrote to you 3 years ago last November, just before my return. I have now come here for a few days to rest, and to collect my thoughts, just as I did at that time on account of my health. All is unchanged here. My room is precisely the same. Even the music in the old cupboard stands exactly in the same spot. The people are quite as considerate and quiet and attentive as formerly, and the 3 years have passed over both them and their house as peacefully as if half the world had not been uprooted during that period. It is pleasant to see. The only difference is that we have now gay spring and apple blossoms and lilacs and all kinds of flowers, whereas at the time we had autumn with its fogs and blazing fires. But how much is now gone forever that we then still had. This gives much food for thought. Just as at that time I wrote to you saying little say farewell till we meet, so must it be today also. It will indeed be a graver meeting, and I bring no Liederspiel with me composed in this room as the former one was, but God grant I may only find you all well. You write, dear Fanny, that I ought especially to hasten my return, in order, if possible, to secure the situation in the Academy, but this I do not choose to do. I shall return as soon as I can, because my father writes that he wishes me to do so. I therefore intend to set off in about a fortnight, but solely for that reason. The other motive would rather tend to detain me here, indeed, if any motive could do so, for I will in no matter solicit the situation. When I reminded my father formerly of the proposal of the director, the reason which he then advanced against it seemed to me perfectly just. He said that he regarded this place rather as a sinecure for more advanced years, when the Academy might be resorted to as a harbour of refuge. For the next few years I aspire as little to this as to any other situation. My purpose is to live by the fruits of my labors, just as I do here, and my resolve is to be independent. Considering the peculiar position of the Academy, the small salary they give, and the great influence they might exercise, the place of director seems to me only an honorable post, which I have no desire to sue for. If they were to offer it to me, I would accept it, because I promised formerly to do so, but only for a settled time and on certain conditions, and if they do not intend to offer it, then my presence can be of no possible use. I do not certainly require to convince them of my capability for the office, and they neither will nor can intrigue. Besides, for the reasons I mentioned in a previous letter, I cannot leave England till after the 11th, and the affair would no doubt be decided before that time. I beg that no step of any kind may be taken on my behalf, except that which my father mentioned concerning my immediate return, but nothing in the smallest degree approaching to solicitation. And when they do make their choice, I only hope that they may find a man who will perform his duties with as much zeal as old Zelter. I received the intelligence in the morning just as I was going to write to him. Then came a rehearsal of my new piece for the piano with its wild gaiety, and when the musicians were applauding and complimenting me, I could not help feeling strongly that I was indeed in a foreign land. And then came here, where I found both men and places unchanged. But Hauser unexpectedly arrived, and we fell into each other's arms and recalled the happy days we had enjoyed together in South Germany the previous autumn, and all that has passed away forever during the last 6 months. Your mournful news was always present to me in its sad reality. So this is the manner in which I have spent the last few days here. Forgive me for not being able to write properly today. I go to town this evening to play, and also tomorrow, Sunday and Monday. I have now a favour to ask of you, dear father, in reference to the cantatas of Sebastian Bach which Zelter possessed. If you can possibly prevent their being disposed of before my return, pray do so, for I am most anxious at any price to see the entire collection before it is dispersed. I might have told you of many agreeable things that have occurred to me during the last few weeks, for every day brings me fresh proofs that the people like me and are glad to associate with me, which is gratifying and makes my life here easy and pleasant. But today I really cannot. Perhaps in my next letter my spirits may be sufficiently restored to return to my usual narrative style. Many remembrances from the Moselles. They are excellent people, and after so long an interval, it is most cheering once more to meet an artist who is not a victim to envy, jealousy, or miserable egotism. He makes continued steady progress in his art. The warm sun is shining out of doors, so I shall now go down into the garden to perform some gymnastics there and to smell the lilacs. This will show you that I am well. London, June 1st. On the day that I received the news of Zelter's death, I thought that I should have had a serious illness, and indeed during the whole of the ensuing week I could not shake off this feeling. My manifold engagements, however, had now diverted my thoughts and brought me to myself, or rather out of myself. I am well again and very busy. First of all, I must thank you, dear father, for your kind letter. It is in a great measure already answered by my previous one, but I will now repeat why I decline sending any application to the committee. In the first place, I quite agree with your former opinion that this situation in the Academy is not desirable at the outset of my career. Indeed, I could only accept it for a certain time and under particular conditions, and even then solely to perform my previous promise. If I solicit it, I am bound to accept the place as they choose to give it, and to comply with their conditions as to salary, duties, etc., though I do not as yet even know what these are. In the second place, the reason they gave you why I should write seems to me neither a true nor a straightforward one. They say they wish to be certain I will accept of it, and that on this account I must enroll myself among the candidates. But they offered it to me 3 years ago, and Liechtenstein said they did so to ascertain if I would take it, and begged me to give a distinct answer on this point. At that time I said yes, that I was willing to carry it on along with Ringenhagen. I am not sure that I should think the same now, but as I said so then, I can no longer draw back, and must keep my word. It is not necessary to repeat my assent, for as I once gave it, so it must remain. Still less can I do so when I should have to offer myself to them for the post they once offered to me. If they were disposed to adhere to their former offer, they would not require me to take a step which they took themselves 3 years ago. On the contrary, they would remember the assent I then gave, for they must know that I am incapable of breaking such a promise. A confirmation of my former promise is therefore quite unnecessary, and if they intend to appoint another to the situation, my letter would not prevent their doing so. I must further refer to my letter from Paris, in which I told you that I wished to return to Berlin in the spring, as it was the only city in Germany with which I was still unacquainted. This is my well-weighed purpose. I do not know how I shall get on in Berlin, or whether I shall be able to remain there, that is, whether I shall be able to enjoy the same facilities for work and progress that are offered to me in other places. The only house that I know in Berlin is our own, and I feel certain I shall be quite happy there. But I must also be in a position to be actively employed, and this I shall discover when I return. I hope that all will come to pass as I wish, for of course the spot where you live must be always dearest to me. But till I know this to a certainty, I do not wish to fetter myself by any situation. I conclude, because I have a vast deal to do to enable me to set off after the next Philharmonic. I must publish several pieces before I go. I receive numbers of commissions on all sides, and some so gratifying that I exceedingly regret not being able to set to work at once. Among others, I this morning got a note from a publisher who wishes me to give him the score of 2 grand pieces of sacred music for morning and evening service. You may imagine how much I am pleased with this proposal, and immediately on my arrival in the Leipziger Strasse I intend to begin them. The Hebrides I mean to reserve for a time for myself, before arranging it as a duet, but my new rondeau is in hand, and I must finish those everlasting Lieder for the piano, as well as various other arrangements, and probably the concerto. I played it last Monday in the Philharmonic, and I think I never in my life had such success. The audience were crazy with delight, and declared it was my best work. I am now going to Michelle's concert to conduct there, and to play Mozart's concerto, in which I have inserted 2 long cadences for each of us. Felix. End of Letters of Felix Mendelssohn-Bartholdy from Italy and Switzerland, translated by Grace Jane Wallace.